Good evening, everybody. Welcome to White Collar Support Group. This is our Tuesday night speaker series. We have a speaker once a month, and tonight's speaker is Lewis Reed. I will talk more about that in a minute. First, some housekeeping. Our speaker series is brought to you by the White Collar Support Group. We have a meeting every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and it's for people who are navigating the white collar criminal justice system. We have a lot of resources. Our website is prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist.org. And you get a lot of resources and information there, including our new initiatives page. We have three initiatives that we've kicked off for this year. We have a pardon and expungement initiative. We have a right to banking initiative. And we also are doing a research study with Erin Fry, who's at the Yale School of Management, and she's studying white collar second chances. So anybody who'd like to participate in that study, go to prisonist.org and you can sign up for the study and get more information about our other initiatives as well. Also, I want to announce that in a month on May 13th, we're going to have our speaker is Tony Dominguez. Tony was cited in a long article in the Financial Times of London as the world's most elite sober coach. I'm not sure what that means, but either does Tony, I guarantee you. They made it up. He's a super cool guy from Los Angeles, has a tremendous backstory of drugs and alcohol and all kinds of crazy stuff. Now living in Stockholm and travels all over the world, servicing people who have substance abuse disorder. And he's going to talk to us about the commonality between substance abuse disorder and other maladaptive behaviors, such as criminal behavior or alleged criminal behavior, as the case may be. So tonight, our speaker is Lewis Reed. Lewis is a friend of mine. We have been friends for a long time now. Lewis hails from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I worked in Bridgeport for a long time. And so we know each other all kinds of different ways. We've participated in all kinds of events together, even early speaking. We did early speaking together. I'm going to read something here about Lewis, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to him. Lewis, you ready? Just give me a nod. Tell me you're there. So
I'm here. Yes, Jeff, I'm here.
great. All right. So I'm just going to read something about you, and then I'll turn the meeting over to you for a half hour or so, and then we'll go to questions and answers and sharing. Okay. So Lewis L. Reed is a nationally recognized leader in social impact, blending lived experience with expertise in criminal justice reform, policy advocacy, and public health. After serving nearly 14 years in federal prison, he helped pass over 30 state and federal bills, including the First Step Act of 2018, creating pathways to freedom for more than 650,000 individuals. Reed is the executive vice president of the Douglas Project for Justice, where he leads efforts to reduce recidivism and support successful reentry. Previously, he served as senior director of strategic partnerships for Jay-Z's Reform Alliance and director of membership and organizing at Dream Corps Justice, co-founded by Van Jones and Jessica Jackson. Lewis has an incredible story, incredible background, incredible work. One of the best speakers I've ever heard, for sure. And welcome, Lewis, and it's all yours for about a half hour. So thank you.
Yeah, I have stage fright, everyone. So I don't know how well I'm going to be. Before I get into our discussion this evening, I just wanted to just point to personal privilege, and I'll walk you through what my experience has been over the last decade or so. But before I do that, I really want to just point to Jeff's leadership in terms of how Jeff has not just been a friend to me, but Jeff has also been a guiding light for me of the sort as well. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a second, but I just wanted to just really lift up Jeff's leadership. I really do appreciate how Jeff has been coalescing and bringing people like us together. When I say people like us, you notice that I never use the word a felon. While that may be some people's prerogative to do so, that's fine. I'm into changing public perception, changing hearts and minds about how folks look at people like us, people who are justice impacted, people who are not returning citizens, people who are not felons, people who are not any of the pejoratives that the system tries to assign to us, people who are fathers, people who are attorneys, people who are at the peak of their professional careers, people who are people. And so being able to bring people like us together, I think that that's absolutely something that's absolutely necessary. As introduced, my name is Louis L. Reed. I served 14 years in federal prison. And while I was incarcerated, there was one of three things that happened with and to me. First and foremost, and unapologetically, I am a believer in the tenets and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm not here to proselytize anyone, but I do want to talk about how my transformation happened, not necessarily from a religious perspective, but from a revolutionary perspective. When I began to study who Jesus was, not from the perspective as to redemption, but really, again, from revolution, I saw that Jesus was one of the people who, in effect, had challenged and disrupted the Roman criminal legal system. I started looking at how if Jesus was a contemporary, what he was prosecuted for, what he was arrested for, what he was convicted for, and ultimately what he was sentenced to, the entire world, if we thought that we were up in arms about George Floyd, the entire world would probably be turning its local government, state government, federal government, and even world government on its head. If we saw or if we experienced what happened to Jesus contemporarily. And so that got me to thinking. It got me to thinking about one of the notions that he had lifted up in saying, when we get on the other side of life and when our resume is read, so to speak, when God asks us, what do we do to those who were least in society? We aren't going to be asked by the angels if whether or not we made a TikTok that went viral. We won't be asked if whether or not we have more degrees than a thermometer. We are going to be evaluated by what we did with the least of those who are in society. And in our country, in the United States of America, there's nobody who is more least in society than folks who are justice impacted, than folks who have lived experience, than the folks who live in that 70 million category of people who have criminal convictions. There are no more people who are least in those than after folks have been locked up, we are now locked out of opportunity. According to the American Bar Association, and Jeff is of a better mind than I am, he's our resident attorney here. According to the American Bar Association, there are more than 46,000 collateral consequences to one felony conviction. I don't have to pontificate. I don't even have to go into soliloquy as to what those collateral consequences are, because most of the folks who are on this call, we have experienced them. We've been locked out of opportunity. In some states, you're locked out of life insurance. And for Black, brown, and pro-white communities, that is the only way that we are able to perpetuate generational wealth. Locked out of employment, locked out of housing, locked out of licensure, locked out of certification, so many other things. So that was the first thing that happened to me. The second thing that happened to me is that I got a little bit of an education. That's how we say it in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I'm from, where you got where the schools are underfunded and alternative in orientation. Got me a little bit of an education. But the third thing that happened with me is I discovered a notion by a guy whose name is Glenn E. Martin. And at the time, Glenn was a VP at an organization called the Fortune Society. And there was a warden, or I should say he was the regional director at the time, who eventually became the first Black director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He came into the institution that I was at, and he put on a DVD, and he used Glenn, this guy by the name of Glenn E. Martin, as a prototype of the sort, to say, hey, if this guy can do it, you can do it too. And as Glenn was talking in this DVD, I don't remember much of what he said, but what I do remember is that he said, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from power and resources. Let me say that one more time for the people who might be connected via Boost Mobile. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from power and resources. And that got me to thinking. With the aforementioned of how I was inspired was when I was incarcerated, I wanted to close that gap. So what did I do? When I came home, I springboarded my career in human services. Then I convinced the largest city in the state of Connecticut that they needed a government office for reentry affairs. I also convinced them that I was the perfect man for the job. In that position, that's where I had the benefit of my life intersecting with Jeff. I was in that position for about 2 years. We replicated the model literally across the country and all of the major cities, and most of the major cities, I should say, Los Angeles, Chicago, LA, Detroit, New York, etc. Their government office for reentry affairs was modeled after ours. How do I know that? Because in 2017, we won an award from the U.S. Conference of Mayors for best reentry practices. And then when I was in that role, in part, I was rearrested for child support arrears that accrued while I was incarcerated. I slipped into a clinical depression. I had a suicidal ideation. And when everyone else was running out the door, Jeff Grant and maybe one or two other people, including Glenn E. Martin, who I have the benefit of calling a friend as well, they were the only few people who walked in when everybody else ran out. I want you to keep in mind, we're not talking about people who have always crossed on the green and not in between who ran out the door. We're talking about people who had similar experiences in terms of having been just as impacted like myself. They ran out of the door on me. And I remember a call that I got from Jeff, and he said, he didn't ask Lewis what happened. He didn't say, Lewis, what were you thinking? He didn't say anything. He said, Lewis, how are you? And I said, I'm trying to see my way clear, Jeff. He said, I want you to come and at the very least get grounded, and I want you to volunteer for me at an organization that he was the executive director at called Family Reentry. And in my mind, it's people like Jeff that we need in this world. When the world is falling apart, when you have folks who, in effect, try to I remember when you need people who are going to say, I don't care what the situation or circumstance is. You need a friend. You need a heart. You need a hug. You need some prayer. I got you. So I won't embellish the rest of my career, but what I do want to highlight is just this thought that I have. Before I was an advocate and an executive and a strategist, I was a number. We were a number. We were a number. We were a ghost in a system that forgot our names, but never stopped tracking our bodies. So when I speak to you, I'm not just talking about policy. I'm talking about survival. I'm talking about revival. I'm talking about revolution. And when I think about how, even in some of the comments that I heard prior to us going live this evening, we were talking about the current federal state of affairs and how everyone seems to be up in arms. And this seems to be a very scary time, a time probably that no one in our lifetime has ever experienced from people who are in the highest positions of government in our nation. I want to be clear. I want to be clear and say that while we do have a 2.0 version of a Trump administration, and with him, and this is not being partisan when I say this, with him, seem to be a storm of policies that are designed to shrink our rights, to silence our voices, and to send us back. Here is the thing that folks on the federal, state, and or local level may not bring to mind. Some storms don't scare people who have already survived the flood. Storms don't scare people who have already survived the flood. We have already survived the flood. Literally, I'm right here. I'm in Colorado this evening, and I'm at the conference on world affairs. And I had the benefit of giving some remarks, some opening remarks, and I'll be featured on a few panels. And there was a room today where one of the students asked me during a Q&A, they said, Lewis, how do you reconcile being someone who has been incarcerated, having worked across three administrations, and with the current state of affairs in our federal government? How do you reconcile that? I say I don't. I told him I don't. I told this individual, I personally believe that Republicans at their best believe in liberty, Democrats at their best believe in justice, and all of us at our best should believe in liberty and justice for all people. I told him that I'm not scared or I'm not concerned. Reason being is because my worst day in society is better than my best day when I was incarcerated. And so for me, these are great problems to have. I was sharing how this isn't just a political moment. In my mind, it's a moral reckoning. We got over 50,000 people free under the First Step Act. Thousands more are fighting to get free. In effect, we have shrunk the federal prison population by a third. More than 50,000 people free under one bill alone. Out of those 50,000 individuals who came home, 81 to 85% of those people have not recidivated. Have not recidivated. The rest, I think there's another 10% or so, the last time we were briefed on it, the other 10% or so, when they did recidivate, it wasn't because they committed new crimes. They were remanded back into custody due to technical violations, technical supervision violations. But another thing that I was sharing with our audience today is that I don't think that reentry should be the finish line. I think that it should be a launch pad. We are not returning citizens, we are returning leaders. When they introduced me in the bio here at the World Conference on World Affairs, one of the things that I questioned the audience is that, how long do I have to be home before I'm not a returning citizen? When does the expiration date activate, where I'm home long enough where you're not no longer referring to me as a returning citizen? If you want to refer to me as a returning leader, I'll gladly accept that. But in my mind, the new architects of safety are people like us. We are the new re-engineers and redesigners of justice. So we can't get stuck playing defense while they legislate us into margins. And I think that we have to create the system we never got to come home to. We have to create the system that we never got to come home to. And so when I reimagine what it's like for people like you and I, people who have survived something that would have probably taken other people out in the process, if they experienced a fraction of what it is that we experience, probably on this line, if you quantify the number, there's probably, I don't know, over 500 years of incarceration on this line. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years of human freedom restored back into our communities on this line. But one thing that you can't quantify is a level of genius that is on this line. You have attorneys, you have podcasters, you have folks who are creators, you have folks who can run circles around people who got elected into Congress to advance policy. Like, this is who we are. And so when I reimagine justice, the one question that I want to put to you is, if you could design justice from scratch, what would it look like? What would that look like? If we could redesign our justice system from scratch, what would that look like? Would it involve $1 million prisons, or $1 million investments in healing. Interestingly enough, our Department of Corrections, for those of you who are business astute, our Department of Corrections is the only government institution that we as taxpayers reward for failure. Let me say that one more time. Our government institution, our Department of Corrections is the only institution that we reward for failure. How do you quantify that, Lewis? Where do you get that math from? The math is not mathing. Well, let me explain it to you. If Francis is jailed today and Francis comes back next week and he brings Brent, they are forecasting in their budget for the following year how much money that they are going to need, how much of your money, your tax-paying dollars, how much of your money they're going to need as a result of how many intakes or reentrants that they had into their system this year. And if the Department of Corrections was on the NASDAQ, S&P, if it was on the New York Stock Exchange, et cetera, their business practice would be ran out of town. So why is it that we allow this degree of failure to continue to operate? Juliet, you pay taxes. Michael, you pay taxes. Jeff, you pay taxes. Shonda, you pay. We are making an investment in our government institutions, but we reward them. We allow them to function from a space of failure. We allow them to function from a space of failure. And so, for me, in my mind, when I think about who we are, who you are, we are not a statistic. We're strategists. You're not a second chance. I don't need no second chance. I'm a second wave. I am what this country needs. My experience, my lived experience, my subject matter expertise, my thought leadership, what I understand about policy, what I understand about organizing, what I understand about mobilization. We need people like Jeff, who took the system to task and had his license to practice reinstated. We need people like that. That's the genius that this country needs. That's the genius that that our communities needs. And let me also challenge another notion as well, that society seems to signal to us that we're broken. There's nothing broken about us. You're the proof that freedom is possible, even in a system built to erase us. We're the proof. We're the living proof that freedom is possible even in a system that is built to erase us. And so in my mind, this is not the age of reform. This is the age of reinvention. This is not the age of reform. It's the age of reinvention. How do we reinvent? How do we reinvent? How do we challenge the status quo? With everything that is happening on the federal, state, and local level, we have midterms that are going to be happening probably the day after tomorrow. It feels like they're going to creep up on us in very real time. How do we elect from among us? How do we develop a super PAC where we target someone like Carrie, where we identify somebody like John, who's in our community, where we identify somebody like Jeremy, and we said, hey, you know something? We are going to put our fundraising dollars, we're going to put all of our genius, and we're going to put it behind somebody like Brent. And now Brent is going to run for Congress. Now Brent is going to run for state rep. So rather than us relying on somebody from the outside in, we're going to raise somebody from the inside and elect them out. And now we have the constituency. We have the constituency. We have the voting power. We have someone who's going to be in a position of influence, who can speak for the people, who understands what it's like to be marginalized, to be overlooked and undervalued, who understands what it's like to be the least of these in society. And so when I think about what this reinvention of justice looks like, I think that the opportunity is right. The opportunity is right with everything that is going on in the country, with everything that seems to be going wrong in the country, with everything that seems to be going prospectively right in the country. We need each other now more than we ever did. We need to be strategizing. We need to be having conversations like this. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a quick story that always makes my heart dance. Van Jones. A lot of people don't know this about Van, but Van, who I work for, who I consider a mentor and friend and another guiding light in my life. Van was, in effect, the chief executive officer or chief strategist or whatever the functioning title was for Prince, the purple one. I'm talking about Prince. And so Van tells a story about how Prince would call Van, and Prince would say, Van, where are you? And Van would say, hey, Prince, I'm at this conference. And Prince would hang up the phone. And Prince would call back a month or two later. Van, where are you? And Van would say, hey, I'm at this committee meeting. And Prince would hang up the phone. And so one day, Van goes out to Paisley Park. And while they're having a strategy meeting around the foundation and Prince's philanthropy, et cetera, the notion gnaws at Van. And Van asks Prince, after the formalities are done, Van says to Prince, he said, AP, how come you keep hanging up the phone on me every time you ask me where I am? And I tell you where I am. You don't have a phone. I can't call you back because Prince didn't believe in telephones for whatever reason. I can't call you back. So you call me, you hang up on me. I can't call you back. And Prince tells Van, he says, Van, you're weak. And so Van, he starts running through his own biography, his own resume. What do you mean I'm weak? I'm Obama White House alum, and I was the Green Czar, and I taught at Princeton, and I got more degrees than a thermometer. What do you mean that I'm weak? Instead, Van asked a pointed question. He said, "How? What makes you say that?" Prince told Van. He said, "Van," he said, "I don't believe specifically in Black conferences, nor do I believe in committees." He said, "I believe in conspiracies." And Prince went on to explain to Van that a conspiracy, in the context of our conversation, a conspiracy is not something that you see. It's not something that you advertise on social media. It's the thing that happens in the back room where Jeff Grant brings people like Juliet together with somebody like John, with somebody like Julie, with somebody like Gina, with somebody like Cooper, with somebody like me. Bring people like us together. And in the back room, we strategize on what our next play is. What's our playbook? What's our playbook? And then we develop a playbook and we develop a strategy. And while we may be on differing sides of the aisle, the one common denominator that we have is our lived experience. And so when we break from our back room, Juliet can go back to her respective place, and Michael can go back to his respective place, and John can go back to his respective place, and we can do things the way that we do things. And no one knows that there's quiet support in the back room for what the public advocacy is going to be in our respective communities. I say this as a PS. Everybody has a playbook. The White House has a playbook. Congress has a playbook. Government has a playbook. Everybody has a playbook except us. What's going to be in our playbook? What's going to be in our playbook? And so I'm going to pause for a commercial break. I know that Jeff gave me about 30 minutes or so to speak. I'm going to pause for a commercial break. And with Jeff's permission, I'm going to open up the floor for questions, comments, concerns, feedback based off of some of the remarks that I've shared. And it also gives me a time to drink something good and refreshing.
Louis, you are amazing, man. I'm telling you. I want to tell you, I've seen Louis speak many, many times. And he was speaking at a church one day. I can't remember it was at a church, but it wasn't a church meeting. It was a big, big crowd. And and so Louis is speaking, and I'm telling you, he's got everybody all riled up. And and he comes up to me and he kind of looks at me and like he's a little boy, and he says to me, what do you think of that? And I go, you could talk, Louis. At any rate, if anyone would like to share or ask Louis a question, please put your name in chat, um, and um, and I will call on you. I'm going to ask the first question. So, Louis, why don't you give us some insight, if you could, as to how the First Step Act got passed, and also there was a lot of politics back and forth as to whether it was a good thing, a bad thing, back and forth, and you were part of that movement that had a very specific guiding star. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, this is an unshameless plug. If you want to know more about how the First Step Act was passed, you can go to Amazon and you can just type in First Step and you can see a film featuring myself, Van Jones, Kim Kardashian, et cetera. And you'll be able to get a far much more elaborate answer to the question than what I'm going to provide
What,
for you.
do you think that was a setup, Louis?
I think so, but we alley oop good though, right? Like, so, but beyond that, what I will say is this: you have to consider that people who are in the prison house don't care who's in the White House so long as they can get back to their mama's house. When I was incarcerated, I have never met a person who said once they were notified that they were going to get early release, a commutation or a pardon of any kind, to say, hey, I got an opportunity to go home. I got an opportunity to leave here right now. But wait, was it a Republican that signed my pardon? Because if so, I want nothing to do with it. I can walk out of these doors after having been sentenced to life. But if that was a Democrat who signed my commutation, I want nothing to do. I've never heard that. I've never heard that. And so one of the things that we did, we always kept people centered. Our constituents, they weren't in Congress. Our constituents were the people who were incarcerated. Our constituents were the families of those who had to drive more than 500 miles because their loved one was placed beyond a plane, train, and an automobile. Our constituents were women who were being shackled while they were giving birth and in postpartum. Our constituents were the women who wanted dignity while they were incarcerated because they weren't getting free feminine hygiene products. Our constituents were women who were being strip searched by the opposite sex while they were incarcerated. Our constituents were 97% of the people who got released under the crack cocaine provision who happened to be Black Americans that were sentenced due to draconian drug laws. That's who our constituents were. And so we kept that top of mind. Did we have a strategy? Absolutely. Did we have an inside-outside game? Absolutely. Did we have, by all appearances, what seemed to be a wild card in Kim Kardashian walking into the White House asking POTUS whether or not he would support the bill? Absolutely. But the people by whom we were fighting for were the folks who were incarcerated. And we pulled from the spirit of the civil rights era, where Dr. King talked about the fierce urgency of now. If not now, when? You have to consider how monumental the First Step Act was. It is the only criminal justice reform bill in history that has been validated and affirmed by all three branches of government. Has been passed by Congress, it has been signed by the president, and it has also been affirmed by the US Supreme Court. And so we knew that we were on the right side of history, even when everyone else was saying no, even when everyone else was calling me a sellout. for being tethered to the Trump administration, even when everybody else was calling Van Jones all type of pejoratives because he went into CPAC. We knew what our main thing was. Our main thing was our main thing. And so, again, if you want to know more about our strategy and you want to know more about how arduous that task was, you can go to Amazon and you can just type in First Step Film, and you'll see what our very, very, very arduous journey was.
Thank you, Louis. All right. Next speaker question is Michael, then Carrie. And we can use some more names, please. And then Juliet. Sorry.
Louis, man, I can't thank you enough for your words, man. Your passion, it's infectious, man, and we appreciate you. I just got a question. When they initially passed the First Step Act, I was actually still incarcerated at the time, and it shaved, I believe, 7 days off of my sentence.
Yep.
And every little bit helps, do you know if they're taking any? I'm sorry, you're going to say something.
Now I was going to say 7 days per year. Off of the sentence. Yeah.
Right. And are they taking any other steps? Because according to the manuals, the program, you're supposed to get that's supposed to add in, and because everybody was doing the calculations, and of course, inmate.com is never wrong. So you're looking at, okay, man, this is going to come off. So do you know if there are any steps being taken for the people that are still there to
what I do know is this, that the Bureau of Prisons, they do what I call female math. And it's not, I'm not trying to be insulted, right? It's what I call female math. And this is an inside joke. So not too long ago, I was having a conversation with my son, and my son took this young lady out for dinner on 2 or 3 occasions. And this is over the course of about 2 or 3 weeks. And then probably 3 weeks into it, so she asked him, she said, so what are we doing with each other? my son's like, what are you talking about? She was like, we going out 3 times, right? You texting me all the time. What are we doing with one another? And I said, son, that's female math. and so they're doing what I consider what me and my son would consider called female math, right? The math ain't mathing. Quite frankly, and the Bureau of Prisons is responsible primarily for the implementation of the First Step Act. Look, we passed that bill back in 2018. We're in 2025. You mean to tell me that you can't hit a button? you can't key a stroke and make sure that the entire Bureau of Prisons is recalculated based off of program participation? Look how long it took for folks to even get good time calculation, the extra 7 days that Congress went from may to shall.
Right.
I mean, that in and of itself is absolutely asinine. And so I do know that there is something that's still being talked about on the Hill. And also there seems to be appetite. I can't say what level branches of government. I will say both on the executive level and on the legislative level, there seems to be an appetite for a Second Step Act. And what specific provisions will go in that's to be told. But yeah, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you, and it's exasperating at the very least to say.
Right. Thanks for your answer, man. Again, thanks for your share. It was awesome. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Next is Carrie, and then Juliet, and then Gina.
Hey, Louis, thanks for your words. 2 questions, real quick one. First one, how do you feel about former BOP employees being prison consultants? And 2, with all the work that you put into the FSA and everything that's going on with the BOP right now, claiming only 60 days with SCA, is there anything in the FSA that you would change today?
Change, no. Add, yes. You have to consider that we fought also against the Freddy Krueger in the likeness of Tom Cotton, to keep a lot of good things in and to keep a lot of terrible things out. So would I add, would there be things that I would add to FSA? Absolutely, right? Like conspiracy for one, and a whole bunch of other things. However, to answer the former part, the former part of your question, what do I think about former BOPs employees being consultants? Look, them folks gonna look out for their own. That's just how they do, right? Like it's just like retired law enforcement officers going back to all of a sudden, conduct training, etc. I think that I know Colette Peters. Personally, I consider her a very close colleague, and I do know that she tried to take some very innovative and creative steps in order to be able to change the notion about throughout the BOP. But that place is hard to penetrate. I am telling you, that place is very, very, very hard to penetrate. You have folks who are in there who just have this us against them. I've seen police departments that have been easier to penetrate than I have seen with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so I think that you know what I would really love to see, Carrie? I would really love to see a formerly incarcerated person who, in effect, got a pardon be nominated as the first formerly incarcerated BOP director, or
Amen.
somebody in positions of leadership. Maybe not the BOP director, maybe second in command or something. I would love to see that.
Yep. Never happened.
Yeah, I know that we got a few more questions, and I have a hard out at 5:58. I'm in Colorado, so
Yeah, all right, good.
yeah.
All right. Let's see, Juliet and then Gina.
Hi, Louis. Good to see you.
Hey, likewise.
Okay. Louis, I remember when I met you in Bridgeport. And I was in that fragile state, not understanding the judicial system. And my first thing going on, I can't remember, it was a halfway house for women or something where we met. And next thing I know, I needed help. And you were able to finagle for me to get to Florida. I remember it was, to get the services that I needed back then, because no one understands unless you've been through it, the challenges.
Yeah.
People on the outside, they may try to support, and sometimes they don't say the most supportive things, but they don't know any better because they hadn't been there.
Mhm.
So I'm very grateful for the work that you've done and the tenacity and everything. And, I'm a firm believer, and I'm partnering up with some other group members to help foster change, because no one else is going to do it. We're the ones that we're waiting for.
Yeah, yeah,
Nobody else is coming.
yeah.
That's the bottom line. And that's just the way that I look at life, period.
Yeah,
Even like you were saying, that, when do we stop? When do we stop being a convicted felon? When do we stop being returning citizens? As a matter of fact, I'm going to the board for my licensure to see if they'll give it back to me. And it's on the 18th. And I'm just praying and hoping that they accept it, and I look at this, I'm like, wait a minute, it's like you're being punished continuously, you
hmm
know, unlike people who commit violent crimes, they get that one punishment. We
hmm
get punished, in our livelihood, we get punished with the restitution, we get punished by incarceration. And so change can only happen from those who really have been through it. I don't
yeah,
think, you know what I mean? We're not going to get it any other way. So we're the ones we're waiting for. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
yeah. I appreciate you.
Juliet, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful words. Next is Gina, and we probably have time for one person after Gina. Go ahead, Gina.
No, I'm going to take all 6 minutes.
Go
Just
for it.
kidding. Hi. I've heard you before. I think it was maybe with Justin, um, but I could be wrong. Uh, so I'm glad I was able to get on here and hear you today. And I also put the record, and it's really powerful. I mean, just watching, everything that went in, not everything, watching the parts that were filmed, what went into all the work that was done to get that done. My question is around the Second Chance Act. So I'm on an ankle monitor right now. I'm on home confinement until Friday, and then I move on to a 6 month with the DOJ, which because my judge gave me a split sentence. Um, but my question is about Second Chance Act, that like the people that I was in with, two of them, that one was in for 10 years, one was in for 14. so far, they've both got their dates taken away from them. And do you 60-day bullshit? I mean, it doesn't affect me personally, but it affects a lot of people that are still in there.
You know, this is not the first time that I've heard stories as such. And one of the things that I can say, Gina, is this: you are now home, which makes you even though you might still be under the supervision of whatever government authority that is monitoring you, you still have access to your representative. And oftentimes when you think about advocacy, you think that advocacy is in the way that has to be documented through a film process, i.e. First Step, i.e. When Does Freedom Begin, another film that I'm featured in, etc. But you can literally send an email. You can call constituency services to your representative, to your congressperson. That's advocacy. You can literally say, hey, look, I am calling because what's happening currently in the BOP, your office may not necessarily be aware of. And every person who is retained for an excessive period of time is placing more of a tax strain, financial strain on our community. The moment that you start talking about dollars, people think that you make sense. And so I wish I had all the answers. I don't, but I would love for you and I to stay connected on this very issue. I just, sent you a message.
I got it.
Yeah, I would love for you and I to be able to stay connected on this issue and see how we can make progress on it. But that's just
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's just not exclusive for Gina. Everyone who is on the call, you can. This is the reason why these people are elected. They are elected to be our representatives. They're called representatives. Represent me. Represent my interest. My interest may not be your interest, but however, when you think about that voting block that we have 70 million people, imagine if Gina is in whatever town. Imagine if Gina is connecting with all of the people who are justice impacted, who are now ringing their representative phones and saying, hey, look, your job is on the line and you're up for a performance evaluation. Like how we say in the corporate world, you're up for a performance evaluation. And your performance evaluation is going to be determined if whether or not we're going to rehire you or we're going to find somebody else to fill your position come the midterms. They will start responding.
Yeah, I've been very vocal through this entire process. I mean, so much that it's gotten me in somewhat of a lot of trouble. So, I didn't have anything to lose. So I literally handed the BOP reentry director a 4-page complaint letter.
Wow.
Like the treatment is wrong.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Good for you.
All right, thank you, Lori. I apologize. We're gonna have to.
No, Lori. I'll take. I got Lori. You got to be fast though.
I'm new, and what would you suggest as a first step to try to make change and do something?
I think that what it is that I just talked about. Whatever the issue is that you care about, you have to instigate that care with either your local, state, and or federal representatives. If not, if that doesn't do it for you, then find somebody or run yourself. That's it.
Thank you.
Look, grace and peace to each and every person that's on this line. I got to hop because I have another meeting that I have to go to, but I appreciate you. Let's make sure that we stay connected.
Louis, thank you so much.
Appreciate you, my brother.
Have a wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.